Welcome back to the loft. This is part 2 of my 737 motorized throttle quadrant build. Let's get right to it. Hi there, my name is Paul. I'm a musician and educator, and I love to build things. In the last episode, I completed throttle lever number 1 for a 737 fully motorized throttle quadrant. If you're inspired to take on this project yourself, you can purchase all of the print files from Carl at 737diy.com. All of the other mechanical and electronic parts are listed in the information section. Let's get started. And just to orient ourselves to the parts, which is what I should have done previously, this is the left-hand side body. And we're going to start the construction of the components into this piece. And the first step is to install the parking brake light. I just finished printing this little part, 2 pieces. One of them is this translucent red. I have an entire brand new roll of translucent red PLA. Not sure what I'm going to do with the rest of it, but that was an expensive part for this print. The next step is to install this throttle guide. This is part number L1. And we're going to attach it right here onto the side of the left-hand throttle housing. And it's going to be attached with 3 screws through the back side here, 3 countersunk M4 screws. Something's wrong. There's a bunch of debris here in the, some PLA debris in the hole. I'm going to have to clear that out. Okay, that looks like a good tight fit. Okay, so our next step is to place this part. This is part number L2. This is the start guide number 1. This part actually has a label printed right into the part. And the color of this one is silver. This gets placed right here, right next to the throttle guide with 2 screws. Next, we're going to install this small micro switch just right up here in the right-hand corner of the throttle housing. It'll be attached with 2 screws. The second screw is going to be installed here with a tiny little M4 locking nut. The screw is installed from the outside of the casing through a slot, which makes the switch angle adjustable. So the idea here is we want the switch just on the outside of the hole, so when it's closed, it's flush with the edge. I might have to adjust it just a little bit. So this next step uses this part. It is labeled L3 and it's called the reverse lock. You'll notice I printed this in white, and for some of the parts it really doesn't matter what color you use because they're going to be hidden inside the unit. So I just used white PLA for the next several parts that will be installed. So you may recall from the first episode I mentioned that when the throttle lever is fully in the idle position, there's a small button that gets depressed which unlocks the reverse thrusters. So this piece here is where that button will connect to, which will disengage the lock on the reverse thruster. This next part is labeled L4. It's the speed brake guide, and it will be installed just inside the housing here in this position. It'll be screwed from the opposite side with 3 M4 screws. Quite important not to over tighten these screws because we are just screwing them into plastic. The next part we have to install here is part number L5. It's called the speed brake guide, and it will be installed right here. This part is also printed in silver PLA. The project calls for 4 NEMA 17 stepper motors and 2 NEMA 17 short body stepper motors. Here I'm just unboxing one of the full size motors. The next step is to place part L6, which is a sliding mount, onto the NEMA 17 stepper motor. Here I'm using PLA filament, but later I realized this part needs to withstand the heat from the motor, so I reprinted it in ABS. You'll see the color change to black later in the video. The next step is to place a spur gear onto the shaft on the motor. The gear also had to be reprinted using ABS filament, which you'll see in the upcoming footage. The next step was to insert two M4 40mm socket head screws into the clamp assembly. This part will secure the stepper motor to the throttle assembly. So here you can see that the parts have been reprinted in the black ABS filament. The next step is to install the motor assembly onto the throttle housing. Unfortunately, I don't have very good footage of this step, so we'll just move on to the next one. In this step, I'm attaching a printed sliding plate onto a small Hall sensor. This sensor is the piece of electronics that will track the movement of the actual throttles and tell the simulator what power level the throttles are set to. So a very important part. Here I'm just making a lateral adjustment to the Hall sensor. And here we'll install the spur gear onto the shaft of the Hall sensor. Next up, we're going to place another NEMA 17 stepper motor into the assembly. Boy, this thing's starting to get heavy. Now we'll place another spur gear onto the shaft of the stepper motor. Next up, we're going to place another Hall sensor onto the casing. And we will add another spur gear onto the shaft of this second Hall sensor. Next up, we're going to place a 6202 bearing into this larger spur gear. Okay, now that we've placed the gear into position, we're going to secure it with an M8 bolt, 35mm, with a washer to the assembly. Time to grab some freshly printed parts from the printer. You know, there's something oddly satisfying about peeling the support material off of a newly printed part. Spoken like a true beginner. Alright, in this next part of the build, we're going to be working on the speed brake stem. And the first step here is to install a couple of 608 bearings onto the studs of the stem. Next up, we're going to place two 6002 bearings into the center hole of the stem. Alright, back to surgical procedure here. So with a pair of tweezers, we're going to insert a 684 bearing into the small opening. And then after that, we're going to insert a compression spring, a 5mm by 15mm compression spring. Okay, well here's where things start to get a little bit tricky when I start working with the aluminum bars. Here I'm working to bend the aluminum stock to match the bends in the white printed part that you can see to the left in the vise. And here I'm just cutting the aluminum bar down to size. I think it's time for a new saw, don't you? What I lack in a hacksaw, I make up for with this awesome center hole punch. Spring-loaded, I might add. So now it's time to attach the newly minted aluminum arm to the speed brake stem. Here I'm attaching the printed part of the lever to the aluminum stem. And lastly, for this part, we'll attach the speed brake handle. Okay folks, we're on the home stretch for this episode. Next up, we're going to insert two 6/8/4 bearings into each end of the link assembly arm. We'll attach with an M4 16mm dome head screw. Okay, and for the last step in this episode, we're going to install the speed brake assembly. That concludes episode 2 of the 737 Throttle build series. Be sure to like and subscribe so that you could follow along right through to the first test flight. Bye for now from the loft.